The air shimmered with a heat that did not belong to this world. Zara's breath hitched as she stumbled through the wreckage of her craft, a tangle of twisted alloys and shattered screens, still glowing faintly with alien glyphs. The acrid tang of burned circuitry clung to her lungs, mingling with the sharper sting of her own blood. She pressed a trembling hand to the jagged tear in her suit, sealing it with a feeble pulse of psychic energy. The effort made her knees buckle. Her reserves were waning. Above her, the sky burned amber, its twin suns glaring down like the unblinking eyes of a predator. Below, the land sprawled out in jagged ridges of stone and sparse vegetation, broken occasionally by the angular silhouettes of distant human structures. The structures buzzed faintly, with lights that hummed in mechanical rhythms, unfamiliar and foreboding. Zara's kind had studied humanity from the fringes of the galaxy, marveling at their chaos, their unpredictable ingenuity. Yet now, marooned on one of their colonies, she felt only a deep, bone-aching dread. She had awakened moments ago to the sharp taste of panic. Memory came in fragments. The blast that had torn through her ship, her crew's psychic screams echoing in her mind before silence swallowed them whole. Zara had fought to control the descent, her hands a blur across controls that sparked and flickered with dying power. But the crash, an eruption of sound and pain, had wiped everything clean. Now the question gnawed at her. Why am I still alive? A low vibration coursed through the ground beneath her boots. Zara froze, her ears straining against the oppressive silence. The vibration grew into a rhythmic thud, and then she heard it, a mechanized hum, the unmistakable sound of human patrols. Their machines roamed this planet, enforcing order with cold efficiency. She had no illusions about what they would do to an alien found trespassing in their territory, especially one with her bloodline. She crouched low, dragging herself behind a shattered console. Her body screamed for rest, but fear drove her forward. A sliver of psychic energy snaked out from her mind, probing the landscape for signs of pursuit. The effort was clumsy. Her once fluid connection to the mental plane now felt like reaching through thick, unyielding tar. Still, she caught flashes, boots crunching against gravel, voices laced with static. Unidentified debris. Sector 9. Her pulse quickened. They were close, but not yet on top of her. She pressed her back against the console, her breath shallow. Her mind raced with possibilities, but none seemed likely to end in survival. And then she felt it. A presence, not human, not fully, brushed against her consciousness. It was faint, an echo at the edge of her perception, but it was enough to make her heart lurch. Zara's people, the Karen, shared an unshakable bond through their psychic web, a network of thoughts and emotions that bound them across the stars. Yet this presence did not feel like the comforting hum of her kin. It was jagged, frayed, and deeply alien, even to her. Her first instinct was to recoil, to sever the fragile connection before it drew attention. But curiosity, a trait that had always been her undoing, made her linger. She reached out cautiously, threading a tendril of thought toward the presence. "Who are you?" There was no answer, but the presence pulsed in response, a flicker of recognition or warning. Before Zara could press further, the connection snapped like a taut string cut too cleanly. She gasped, the psychic backlash sending a sharp ache through her temples. The patrol's voices grew louder, their silhouettes visible now against the horizon. Zara's moment of hesitation had cost her precious seconds. Her limbs screamed in protest as she forced herself to move, slipping deeper into the shadow of the wreckage. "Spread out," one of the voices barked, distorted through the filter of a helmet. "Command wants this locked down." Zara's mind worked frantically. Her powers were too weak for combat, her body too broken for flight. A plan began to form, tenuous and desperate. She pressed her hand to the console beside her, channeling what little energy she had left into its shattered systems. The glyphs flickered feebly, their light casting eerie shadows across her face. "Come on," she whispered, her voice raw. The console sputtered to life, emitting a low hum. Zara reached deeper into its core, her mind weaving through fragmented data streams until she found what she needed. With a final surge of effort, she triggered the emergency distress beacon. The wreckage exploded with sound, a piercing wail that cut through the barren landscape. The patrol faltered, their machines whirring in confusion. Zara seized the moment, slipping through a narrow crevice in the wreckage. She emerged on the other side, her boots sliding against loose gravel as she made her escape toward the distant ridges. She didn't look back. The city loomed before her hours later, its edges blurred by the heat haze. Zara's body was numb, her mind a haze of exhaustion. The presence she had sensed earlier lingered at the edge of her thoughts, its warning clear even in its absence. The humans were dangerous, yes, but something else had awakened in the wreckage, something that now followed her like a shadow. As she stumbled toward the city's outer perimeter, the question burned in her mind. What did I bring with me from the crash? Zara's pulse thrummed in her ears as she crept closer to the city's perimeter. The distant hum of human machinery echoed against the jagged ridges of the alien landscape, growing louder as the city itself came into view. She had underestimated the complexity of this planet, the sheer scale of its human-dominated civilization. What had once seemed like an insignificant colony was now a labyrinth of steel and stone, towering structures that pulsed with unseen energy. Every step she took felt like a misstep, as though the land itself was conspiring to betray her. She reached the edge of the settlement's outer boundary, just as dusk began to settle over the landscape. The two suns sank low, their light casting long shadows across the high fences that surrounded the city. Zara's senses screamed at her to turn back. This was the territory of humans, a place she did not belong, a place that could swallow her whole if they found her. Yet her legs moved on their own accord, driven by the single consuming thought, survival. Beneath her feet, the earth hummed, a faint, pulsing rhythm. It was the same vibration she had felt earlier in the wreckage, the strange echo of something, or someone following her. It had not left her, not since the crash. Now it seemed to be closer, as if it had tracked her to this very point. Zara's breath caught in her throat as the sensation crawled over her skin like 1,000 whispers. She fought the instinct to turn, to see the source of the pulse, but she could not shake the feeling that she was being watched by something far older and far more dangerous than the humans who inhabited this planet. Her gaze flickered to the high fences, where guard towers loomed like sentinels. Spotlights swung lazily across the barren land, their beams searching for movement, hunting for life. Zara's breath hitched as she flattened herself against the cold stone wall, her back pressing against the rough surface as she tried to still her trembling hands. I need to move quickly. No mistakes. She had no illusions about the human forces. From what little she had observed during her brief moments in the city, their military presence was formidable. Their weapons, their tactics, they were not the unrefined species she had once dismissed. She had made the mistake of underestimating them before. Now that arrogance would be her undoing. The seconds stretched into an eternity, each one fraught with the tension of a predator stalking its prey. Zara's heart pounded, her mind a chaotic blur of calculations. She had no plan, only the instinct to survive. She had to get in, find shelter, and figure out what to do next. The path forward was shrouded in uncertainty, but it was the only one left to her. Then the sound, a sharp crack like the snap of a twig, shattered the stillness. Zara froze. It came from behind her. Her body tensed, every muscle screaming for her to flee. Her mind reached out, desperate to sense the source of the disturbance, but all she found was a static pulse, like an interference, something blocking her connection to the psychic plane. It was as if the world itself had gone silent, its edges blurred by an unseen force. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was a human, no, humans, a group of them, moving with purpose and efficiency. The leader, a tall woman with short-cropped hair and a sharp gaze, was dressed in the dark armor of a military officer. Her movements were precise, calculated, as if she were a machine rather than a person. Behind her, two others followed, their eyes scanning the horizon as they approached the edge of the city's perimeter. Zara's throat tightened. She had no doubt they were looking for her. Did they know she was here? Had they tracked her from the wreckage? The desperation in her chest threatened to swallow her whole, but she held her ground, forcing herself to remain as still as the rocks around her. The woman, the leader, paused, just a few feet away from Zara's hiding spot. Zara held her breath, hoping beyond hope that the human would not see her. The seconds stretched painfully long. The air crackled with tension. Zara's mind raced, running through the possibilities. She could make a break for it, try to outrun them, but she knew it would be futile. Her psychic abilities, though once a powerful weapon, were now a mere shadow of what they had been. Her body, too, was weak from the crash. She had no strength left to fight. The woman's gaze swept across the ground, just inches from Zara's hiding place. Her eyes narrowed, as though sensing something was off. Zara felt the flicker of the strange pulse again, stronger this time, closer. The woman's hand reached for the weapon at her side, her fingers brushing the hilt. "Number, please. Not now." Zara closed her eyes, retreating inwardly, hoping that her presence would fade into the landscape, that the woman would not notice the faintest shimmer of her form against the backdrop of stone and shadow. She reached deep within herself, willing her body to meld with the earth, to become one with the dust and the night. But then, the unexpected happened. The woman stopped. "Captain Moore," one of her subordinates said, his voice low but urgent. "There's something here. I can feel it." Captain Moore did not speak immediately. Her expression was unreadable, but Zara could see the tension in the set of her shoulders, the way her fingers tightened around the weapon at her side. "Move out," Captain Moore said quietly. "We're not alone." The group turned, their footsteps echoing as they retreated, fading into the distance. Zara remained motionless for several long moments, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. The pulse, whatever it was, seemed to recede, and the air once again settled into silence. But Zara knew the truth. This was no coincidence. Someone, or something, was hunting her. She could feel it, an ancient presence that watched from the shadows, waiting for her to slip. And the humans, with all their power, were just another obstacle in my path. She had no choice but to follow them, to keep her distance, and learn what she could. The mystery of her survival, of the strange presence that had tracked her to this point, remained unsolved. But one thing was certain. The world she had crash-landed on was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. With a final reluctant glance at the retreating human figures, Zara turned and vanished into the night. The questions that swirled in her mind would have to wait. For now, survival was the only truth she could hold on to. The night had fallen deeper, its shadows stretching like the fingers of a dead god across the barren landscape. Zara moved with the silence of a ghost, each footfall a careful whisper on the earth beneath her. Her senses were alive, every nerve straining to catch even the slightest disturbance in the air. The presence, that strange and unwelcome pulse, had not left her since the encounter with the human patrol. It lingered, close now, closer than before, threading through the dark like a spider weaving its web. She had followed them, Captain Moore and her team, through the winding alleyways of the city's outskirts. Zara had always been a predator, a skilled hunter from a long line of rulers. But now, as she slipped through the shadows, her prey was no longer the humans. It was something older, something more dangerous, something that had awakened within her the moment she had set foot on this forsaken planet. As she moved, her mind worked in overdrive, replaying every moment since the crash, every fragment of memory that had come rushing back with a sharp, painful clarity. The war, the fall of the Karen Empire. Her people, once the rulers of a vast star-spanning civilization, reduced to nothing but whispers in the wind, their psychic powers fading into myth. And now, alone and broken, Zara was left to navigate a world that was as alien to her as the stars she had once commanded. But it was not just the planet that had become alien. It was herself. The powers she had once wielded with ease, the connection to the psychic web that had bound her people together, were now fraying at the edges, as fragile as the threads of an ancient tapestry. She could feel the weakening pulse in her temples, the tug of something, someone, unseen and hidden just beyond her reach. And then it happened. Zara had slipped past the final guard post, threading her way through a maze of metal and concrete, when the air changed. It wasn't the wind, which had remained still and stagnant for hours. It wasn't the subtle shift of the ground beneath her feet. It was something else. A presence. No, an awakening, pushed against her mind, a surge of energy so raw and primal that it made her stomach churn with nausea. Not this again. Zara's heart pounded in her chest as she stumbled, her hand reaching out instinctively for the mental tether that might help steady her, but it slipped through her fingers like sand. The pulse that had followed her from the wreckage, the strange, alien presence, had become a torrent. It tore through her mind like a violent storm, crashing through her mental defenses, leaving her disoriented and weak. She collapsed against a wall, the cold stone biting through her suit, the taste of blood filling her mouth as she fought to regain control. The sensation was overpowering, like being pulled into the very depths of a void. She could feel the presence, its presence, moving inside her head, not just observing, but communicating. Its thoughts crashing against her like waves. Who? She tried to focus, but the words slipped away before they could form. The presence, however, was not silent. Its thoughts slammed into her mind with a sharpness that sent her vision spinning. No escape. Not for you. Not for your kind. A sudden clarity shattered through the mental fog, and Zara gasped as a realization struck her with the force of 1,000 stars colliding. The voice. The pulse. It was not the humans. It was not even a distant echo of her people. It was something far older, something far darker. It's here. She forced her body to move, to stand, to escape the grip of the unseen force that threatened to consume her. Her hand shot out, fumbling for a way to shield herself, to sever the connection, but the energy felt inescapable, its roots digging deeper into her mind like a parasite. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the presence receded. It left behind a silence so profound that Zara could hear the pounding of her own heart in her ears. The air around her seemed to still, the pressure of it lifting like the exhale of a breath held too long, but the damage had been done. Zara's hands trembled as she pushed herself upright, her vision blurry, her body cold and clammy with sweat. Her thoughts were a jumbled mess, fragments of words and images and knowledge that she could not reconcile. The psychic storm had shattered her control, and in its wake, she was left with a new truth that had not been there before. The wreckage of her ship had not been the only casualty of the war. The Karen Empire, broken and scattered, had left something behind, something that was now waking up. And Zara was its first unwitting witness. But there was something else. As the chaos subsided and Zara struggled to regain her bearings, a thought flashed through her mind, cold and unyielding. Captain Moore. Zara had followed her, had watched her and her team from the shadows. She had assumed they were nothing more than human soldiers, a nuisance, an obstacle. But now she was not so sure. Captain Moore had sensed something, felt something that she had not known how to explain. Zara had seen the brief flicker of unease in the woman's eyes earlier, the tension that had snapped through the patrol. Was Captain Moore merely a survivor, a leader in a war-torn world? Or was she, too, connected to whatever was stirring in the depths of the planet? With a sudden, overwhelming sense of clarity, Zara understood the gravity of her situation. She was not just an alien on a strange world, a lost survivor of a dying race. She was a pawn in a much larger game, one she had barely begun to comprehend. The humans were not her enemies, not in the way she had once believed. There was something far more dangerous lurking beneath the surface of this world, something that transcended species, something that would make the fall of her empire seem like a mere whisper in the wind. The real battle had only just begun. As Zara's mind raced, she felt the faintest stir of the presence again, like the brush of a forgotten dream. It was far away now, retreating into the dark recesses of the planet, but it was still there, watching, waiting. The pulse, the storm, the knowledge, it had been unleashed, and Zara knew deep in her bones that whatever it was, it had only just begun to stir. It would not stop until it had taken everything, human and alien alike. And Zara would have no choice but to face it, to survive it, no matter the cost. The rain had begun to fall again, as if the heavens themselves wept for the bloodshed that stained the earth. Zara stood at the edge of the crumbling city, her eyes tracing the faint glow of the distant horizon where the human settlement stood, a gleaming fortress of steel and light in the midst of the darkness. The storm had swept through, violent and unrelenting, and now the air was thick with the scent of wet earth and salt. Her breath came in slow, steady bursts as she fought to steady her nerves, her body still trembling from the psychic assault she had endured only hours ago. The events of the night played like a broken record in her mind, each fragment of memory cutting deeper, sharper. The presence, the force that had reached into her very soul and torn her apart, was not gone. It lingered, just beneath the surface of her thoughts, like a shadow waiting to pounce. But it was no longer just a threat to her mind. It was a threat to everything. And yet, as she stood there, the weight of her past pressing on her shoulders like an anchor, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to make a choice that would change everything. A choice that would determine whether she would ever be free of the dark tides rising within her. She hadn't spoken to Captain Moore or any of her team since the encounter. They had offered their help, their support, but Zara couldn't bring herself to trust them fully, not yet. She had seen the way they looked at her, as if they understood something about her that even she had yet to grasp. They had their own secrets, their own shadows. But Zara was beginning to suspect that these humans, these strangers who had once seemed so insignificant, were part of the answer she was desperately searching for. The truth was beginning to seep through the cracks in her mind, slowly, painfully. She had been wrong about humanity. They were not the enemy, not like her people had been. And yet, the more she learned, the more the questions piled up, each answer leading only to deeper, darker mysteries. Zara closed her eyes, her fists clenching at her sides as she fought to push the fear aside. The storm had been a distraction, a momentary reprieve from the inevitable. She could feel it. The pull, the insistent tug in her chest, urging her to make her way toward the heart of the city, toward the place where the answers waited, shrouded in shadow. The decision was simple, but the consequences of it were anything but. With a quiet exhale, Zara turned and began to walk. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of the world pressing down on her back, but she couldn't stop now. Not when the answers she sought were so close. Not when she could already feel the present stirring again, eager, impatient, ready to reveal itself in all its horrifying grandeur. As she approached the outskirts of the city, Zara spotted a figure standing alone in the rain. The silhouette was unmistakable. Tall, imposing, a presence that cut through the storm like a blade. Captain Aaron Moore. Zara hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to turn away, to leave the humans to their own devices. But something deeper, something far older, told her that she had no choice. The storm inside her was building, and only Captain Moore could help her face it. "You came," Aaron said, her voice cutting through the cacophony of rain, soft but unwavering. Her eyes glinted with a mixture of weariness and something else, something Zara couldn't quite name. Compassion? Curiosity? "I thought you might." Zara didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stared at Aaron, her gaze sharp and searching. There was something in the captain's posture, the way she stood there in the rain without flinching, as if the world itself had no power over her. Zara had never been able to understand it, this quiet, unyielding strength. but she was beginning to see the cracks in the armor, the vulnerable edges beneath the surface. "I've seen it," Zara finally said, her voice low, heavy with the weight of revelation. "The presence, the pulse, it's not just something in my mind. It's real." Erin's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition passing through them. She stepped closer, the rain plastering her hair to her face, but she didn't seem to notice. "You're not the only one. We've been tracking something. Something we can't explain. It's not just here on this planet, it's everywhere." Zara felt a surge of disbelief. "What do you mean, everywhere?" Her voice cracked with the intensity of her need for answers. "It's like a signal," Erin continued, her voice quieter now, as if the mere mention of it might unravel the fragile calm they had managed to maintain. "We've detected it, stretching across the stars. Something, someone, has been manipulating the energy of entire systems. We've traced it to a cluster of worlds, and it's only getting stronger." Zara's pulse quickened. Is it the remnants of my people? Are they alive?" "No," Erin said, her voice firm. "At least, not in the way you think. It's something older, something ancient. We've seen traces of it, but it's as if it's been waiting for something, and now it's waking up." The weight of Erin's words settled over Zara like a suffocating blanket. This was no longer just about survival. It was about the very foundation of the universe itself being threatened, and Zara, whether she liked it or not, was at the center of it all. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The presence she had felt was not just a remnant of her fallen people, nor was it the creation of some alien force. It was something that had been here before them all, something older than even the stars themselves. And now, it was drawing power from Zara, from the psychic abilities that she had once thought were a gift of her species, not a curse. "Then we need to stop it," Zara said, her voice sharp, a new resolve hardening within her. "Before it destroys everything." Erin nodded, but her eyes were shadowed with doubt. "We don't know how, but we'll try. Together." Zara's mind raced as she stepped closer to the human leader, her heart pounding. The storm inside her was growing, surging with an energy she couldn't contain. But now she knew something else. That energy could be harnessed, controlled. She had to make it hers, or else it would consume her and everything around her. As they stood there, the storm raged around them, but Zara's focus had shifted. She could feel the presence, pulling at the edges of her mind. It was closer now, pressing harder. The question remained, could she use the very thing that had haunted her to save them all, or would it tear everything apart? The choice loomed before her, a precipice she couldn't ignore. The stakes had never been higher. The air was still, too still. Zara stood at the precipice, her feet firm against the cracked stone beneath her, the vast expanse of the battlefield stretching out before her like an unyielding ocean. The sky, once dark with storm clouds, had cleared, but the calmness in the air felt wrong, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Behind her, Captain Erin Moore and the rest of her team stood in silence, their presence a quiet but constant reminder of the burden Zara now carried. The battle was over, but the price had been steep. General Voss and his forces were no more, defeated, broken, scattered. But Zara knew that victory came at a cost. The remnants of her people had been vanquished, but something far darker still lurked in the depths of the universe. Zara could feel it, the pulse, the ancient force that had haunted her since the moment she crash-landed on this forsaken planet. It was still out there, waiting, watching. It had been part of her, just as it had been part of everything. The remnants of her people had been consumed by it, just as her species had been consumed by their own pride and hunger for power. But now Zara understood. The presence had not been a curse. It had been a call, a challenge, a reminder, a test. The last of her psychic energy thrummed within her, a fragile thread connecting her to the vast, unknowable forces that moved beneath the fabric of reality. She had learned, through pain and sacrifice, to wield that power, not as a weapon, but as a tool. It was not the strength of her mind that had won the day, but her ability to choose hope over despair, compassion over fear. And it was that choice that had allowed her to overcome the darkness inside herself. She had come to understand that her true strength lay not in her psychic abilities, but in the connection she had forged with those around her, the humans who had fought by her side, the ones who had shown her a path forward when she had believed there was none. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and she closed her eyes, reaching out. The pulse, the heartbeat of the universe was still there, but it was fainter, less oppressive. The storm that had threatened to consume her had passed, leaving only the echoes of its existence, distant but persistent. Zara, Aaron's voice, soft yet steady, broke through the quiet. You don't have to do this. We'll figure out another way. Together. Zara shook her head, a small wry smile tugging at the corners of her lips. You've already done enough, Aaron. This is my fight. It always has been. Aaron stepped forward, her eyes searching Zara's face, as if looking for some sign of doubt, some hint of hesitation. But there was none. Zara was resolute. She had found her purpose, not just in saving the humans who had once been beneath her contempt, but in saving herself from the darkness that had consumed her. The moment stretched, the weight of it pressing against her chest, but Zara no longer feared it. She had accepted that there was no going back, that to move forward, she would have to let go of the past, the ashes of her fallen empire, the ghosts that still haunted her. And with that acceptance, she felt the first true flicker of peace in her heart. I have to go, Zara said, her voice a mere whisper in the wind. It's not over yet, but this is where I start. This is where I begin to rebuild, not just for me, but for all of us. Aaron's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, the hardness of the soldier faded, leaving only the quiet, understanding woman Zara had come to trust. I won't stop you, she said. But you don't have to do it alone. Zara glanced over her shoulder, her gaze meeting Aaron's. I know, and that's why I'm not afraid anymore. With a final glance at the team, Zara turned and walked toward the horizon, the weight of her decision heavy yet freeing. Her heart pounded in her chest, but it was a rhythm that matched her own. She had been born of a race that had fallen to its own hubris, but now she had found something new, a new path, a new purpose. As the last of the sun's rays broke through the clouds, casting a soft glow over the landscape, Zara reached out once more, this time not in desperation, but in strength. She could feel the ancient pulse in the depths of space, but it no longer called to her as it once had. Instead, it felt like a distant memory, an echo of something that had once been. She was not the same alien woman who had crashed on this world, broken and alone. She had become something more, something different, something human. The road ahead was uncertain. There would be challenges, more battles to face, and perhaps even more sacrifices to make. But Zara was no longer the lost, bitter princess of a fallen empire. She was a warrior of the stars, a survivor of her own darkness. And for the first time in a long while, she felt the spark of hope ignite within her, an ember that would never again be extinguished. The end of one journey, but the beginning of another. And somewhere beyond the stars, the pulse of the universe continued to hum. A reminder that the story of Zara, the alien woman who had nowhere to go, was far from over. The city was silent, too silent. Above, the towering spires of glass and steel stretched into the atmosphere like jagged fingers clawing at the sky. Beneath them, the streets hummed with the faint vibrations of hidden engines, but there was no movement, no life, just the steady pulse of a waiting storm. Tari moved through the alleyways with the practiced ease of someone who had become part of the shadows. Her steps were light, almost imperceptible, as if the ground itself was unsure whether it wanted to bear her weight. The cool air tasted metallic, a mix of rain and something deeper, something that clung to the city like a secret. Her eyes flickered across the darkened corners, searching, always searching. It had been weeks since she'd allowed herself to settle in one place for more than a few hours. But tonight, there was no choice. Something was different this time. Something in the air, a vibration she couldn't place, had unsettled her instincts. It wasn't fear exactly. It was something colder, sharper. The sensation that something was waiting, watching, just beyond the reach of her senses. She slowed, drawing herself into the deepest shadows of the alley. Her pulse quickened, her sharp senses tingling in warning. There were footsteps. Her first instinct was to run, to melt into the crowd, to vanish like she always did. But there was something off about these footsteps, too methodical, too deliberate. Tari's breath caught in her throat as she flattened herself against the cool stone wall, her back pressed tight, her body almost invisible in the shadow. She didn't dare to move a muscle. The sound of boots against concrete grew louder, closer. But then it stopped, and for a moment, there was nothing. Silence again. Her eyes darted left and right, scanning the narrow passageway between towering buildings, her mind already calculating her options. Escape routes, hidden alleys, places where she could disappear. But as her gaze flickered toward the far end of the alley, she froze. There, just at the edge of her vision, was a silhouette. A man. Tall, broad-shouldered. The faint reflection of the city's neon lights glinted off his dark armor, and his presence in the darkness felt like a weight pressing in from all sides. Tari's heart skipped a beat. A mercenary. She couldn't see his face, but she knew the look of one of them when she saw it. That cold, calculating gaze, the way they moved with purpose, like predators, always hunting, always waiting for the moment to strike. But what was he doing here? She had made sure to cover her tracks. She had erased her presence, buried her trail beneath layers of false leads. Yet here he was, as if he had been waiting for her all along. Her fingers twitched at her side, instinctively reaching for the small concealed weapon she carried. A lightweight pulse blaster, small enough to be hidden, but powerful enough to stop most threats. But she didn't pull it out. Not yet. There was something in the way the man stood, something that made her hesitate. He was not alone. Tari's keen ears picked up a second set of footsteps, faint but distinct, then a third, and a fourth. More of them. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as the reality of the situation began to settle in. She had been cornered, not by accident, but by design. For a moment, everything went still, as if the entire city held its breath. Tari's mind raced, searching for a way out, a single thread to pull that might unravel this nightmare. But there were no easy answers. She scanned the shadows again, her eyes narrowing. She could hear the soft hum of their breathing now, hear the click of weapons being drawn. They had her. She knew this feeling too well. The tightening of her chest, the cold sweat that slid down her spine. The feeling of being caught in a web, the strands slowly tightening with every passing second. Then, just as the first mercenary began to step forward, something unexpected happened. A flicker of movement. Something fast. Too fast for a human, at least. A shadow within a shadow. Tari's heart skipped, a blur of motion. The mercenary's head jerked to the side, a grunt escaping his throat. His weapon fell from his hands, clattering to the ground. And then there was a sound, a sharp, mechanical click, followed by a deep, rumbling voice. Move! The command was terse, full of authority, but there was something else in it. A sense of urgency. For the briefest moment, the man's voice sounded familiar, but Tari couldn't place it. The mercenaries hesitated, turning in unison, their attention now focused on the new arrival. Tari's heart beat wildly in her chest. She could hear the hesitation in their movements, the uncertainty in the air. The figure emerged from the shadows fully now, a tall human, his face half hidden beneath a dark helmet. His voice was low, almost guttural, as he stepped between Tari and the mercenaries. Tari's pulse raced. This man was not here to capture her. He was here to stop them. And for the first time in years, Tari allowed herself to feel something, a glimmer of hope. The mercenaries weren't so easily deterred. The leader, a tall woman with cold, steely eyes, stepped forward. Commander Zara Kor. Tari had heard of her before. The name was synonymous with efficiency and brutality. If anyone was going to hunt her down, it would be Kor. "You shouldn't have interfered," Kor said, her voice smooth like polished steel. "This isn't your fight, soldier." "I beg to differ," the man said, his tone laced with something dangerous. He lowered his weapon slightly, not out of deference, but because he didn't need to aim it yet. "You're hunting the wrong person." The words hung in the air, heavy and pregnant with meaning. Tari couldn't breathe. For the first time in years, she had no plan, no escape route. She was trapped. But there was something about this man, something that made her wonder if, just for a moment, she wasn't alone in this fight after all. The air was thick with the metallic scent of rain and the crackle of tension, swirling around the alley like a storm that had yet to break. Tari's heart beat faster as the man, this unexpected stranger, stepped forward, his posture unwavering, as though the universe itself had bent to his will. His voice was cold, yet not unkind, but there was something in the way he moved, the precise, calculated steps that spoke of experience, of a mind as sharp as the weapons at his side. The mercenaries hesitated, but their leader, Commander Zara Kor, did not. Tari's eyes flickered to the shadows, her mind already calculating her next move. There was no safe escape, not anymore. Every option, every exit, was compromised. The mercenaries had her surrounded now, and with Zara's cold gaze piercing through the dim glow of the city lights, it was clear this wasn't just a hunt. This was a trap, a well-orchestrated plan that had led them to her doorstep. The stranger, the man who had intervened, was a question mark. A brief flicker of hope, perhaps, but a question mark nonetheless. She had to know more. Could she trust him? Could she afford to? Commander Kor took a step forward, her voice low, cutting through the air like a blade. "You don't understand, soldier," she said, each word deliberate. "This isn't just about capturing her. It's about what she knows, what they know." Her gaze shifted from the man to Tari, and for a moment, Tari felt the weight of the commander's eyes, as if she could see straight through her, peeling back the layers of her secrets. "You think you're helping her?" Kor continued, her eyes narrowing. "You're only digging your own grave." The words landed heavy in the space between them, like an explosion held in check, waiting to unleash. The stranger's expression remained unreadable, but Tari caught the faintest flicker of something, a shift in his stance, a tightening of his jaw. He knew. Tari's mind raced, piecing fragments together. Kor wasn't just some mercenary. She was hunting Tari for something far greater than just her life. She was hunting for knowledge, and that knowledge, whatever it was, could destroy everything. It could unravel worlds, burn entire civilizations to the ground. But what knowledge? What was hidden in her past that could be so dangerous? Tari didn't even fully understand it herself. The secrets she carried were buried deep, locked away in memories too painful, too dangerous to access. "I don't need to understand." The stranger's voice broke through her thoughts, his words sharp and final. "I just need you to leave her alone." His weapon was still lowered, but the threat was undeniable, like the calm before a storm. Kor's eyes flashed with fury, her expression momentarily betrayed. But then, she was cold again. Her smile was devoid of humor, a sharp curve of amusement that did nothing to ease the growing sense of dread in Tari's chest. "If you think you're going to walk out of here alive," Kor said, voice dripping with contempt, "you're sorely mistaken." The mercenaries around them stirred, weapons shifting in their hands, preparing for what was sure to come. Tari's breath caught in her throat. The confrontation was about to escalate, and she was right in the middle of it. But there was something else, a presence in the air, the faintest shift in the tension, like the universe holding its breath. Tari's instincts screamed at her, louder than ever before, urging her to move, to do something, anything. But she couldn't. Not yet. The stranger seemed to feel it too. His hand moved slowly to his side, fingers brushing the edge of a device she hadn't noticed before, something small, inconspicuous, but deadly. It was a weapon, she realized. His weapon. Before she could react, the ground beneath them rumbled, a low guttural growl that reverberated up from the depths of the city. The walls of the alley shook. Tari's pulse spiked as the familiar sound of a hovercraft's engines filled the air, its hum growing louder by the second. And then the sky above them split open with the shriek of descending fire, and everything went to hell. The hovercraft appeared without warning, a massive shadow streaking across the alley like an omen. It descended with precision, barely grazing the tops of the buildings before landing in a cloud of dust and steam, blocking the only escape route. Its sleek black surface reflected the neon glow of the city, its engines hissing as they powered down. Tari's heart hammered in her chest. The corporation had arrived. "You really think you can escape now?" Kor's voice dripped with dark amusement, her eyes gleaming. "It's over, alien." The doors of the hovercraft hissed open, and from the shadows emerged figures in tight combat suits, weapons at the ready. They fanned out with practiced precision, moving toward them with a singular goal. It was clear that Kor had been prepared for this moment, and she wasn't alone. The corporation had sent reinforcements. The game had just escalated, and there was no way out. Tari's mind whirled, her body tense, calculating. She could fight, she could flee, or she could... Before she could finish the thought, the stranger stepped forward, his hand raised in a gesture of defiance. "Don't move," he commanded, his voice carrying an unmistakable authority. He turned his head slightly, glancing back at Tari. "You want out of this alive? Follow me. Now." The words snapped her into motion before she could think. She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask questions. She trusted her instincts, and in that moment, they screamed at her to run. A split-second decision. She bolted. The alley exploded in chaos as gunfire rang out, harsh blasts echoing off the walls. Tari's feet barely touched the ground as she sprinted forward, her heart racing, adrenaline surging. The stranger was beside her, his movements smooth and fast, his every step in perfect sync with hers. She could hear the hum of weapons charging behind them, the shrill cry of energy blasts skimming past her. But it was the hovercraft that terrified her most. It moved in tandem with them, its engines roaring to life, lifting into the air with unnatural speed, tracking their every move. The stranger didn't falter. His hand remained steady, guiding them through the labyrinth of the city's underbelly, always just one step ahead. But she could feel it. The heat on her back, the pressing danger, and the weight of the decision she had made. Trust. She had trusted him, but could she trust him with her life? As they reached the end of the alley, a dead end, a wall, there was no way out. Tari's breath was shallow now, her chest rising and falling with the effort, the panic. And then, she saw it. The faintest glimmer of light. A door. It wasn't much, barely a crack in the stone. But it was enough. The stranger's hand shot out, his fingers brushing against the surface of the door, a quick motion. A hiss of air and the door opened. They were inside. Tari barely had time to register the change in the air as the door slammed shut behind them. Silence descended, the sound of their breathing the only thing that filled the space. The stranger turned to her, his eyes flickering with something unreadable. "You're safe for now," he said, his voice low. But the weight of the words hung between them. Safe for now. Tari's heart was still racing, her mind spinning. The city above was alive with chaos. But in this room, there was a different kind of silence. A silence that spoke of too many questions left unanswered. The silence in the dimly lit room was suffocating, thick with the tension of unspoken words and unfathomable decisions. Tari's breath was steadying, but her mind was a maelstrom. The door that had closed behind them was no fortress. She could still hear the distant hum of hovercraft engines, the faint echo of the mercenaries and their pursuit. The city outside pulsed like a living thing, its heartbeat quickened by the chase. But inside this small, concealed space, the stranger, the man who had pulled her from the jaws of certain death, was waiting. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his hood, but his posture radiated a cold intensity, the weight of his presence pressing down on the room like a physical force. He was standing still and silent, as if the world outside no longer mattered. Tari's pulse quickened as she studied him, the questions piling up in her mind. Who was he? Why had he helped her? Was he really a mercenary, or something else entirely? And then there was the question that gnawed at her more than any other. What did he know? Her instincts told her that he knew more than he was letting on, that he had an agenda of his own. The problem was, she wasn't sure whether to trust her instincts. Every move she had made in the past had been a calculation. Careful, deliberate. She had survived because she trusted her gut. But this man, this stranger, was an enigma, and Tari wasn't sure if she could afford to be wrong. You should be more careful next time. He finally spoke, his voice cutting through the stillness like a blade, its rough edges softened by a strange undertone of something almost familiar. The corporation doesn't play by anyone's rules, not even their own. Tari's mind shifted. The mention of the corporation, the one that had been hunting her for as long as she could remember, made her heart tighten in her chest. Echelon Industries, a name that had become a shadow in her past, a specter that had followed her every step since she escaped their grasp years ago. But something in the stranger's tone made her pause. The corporation doesn't play by anyone's rules. There was a finality in his words, an understanding that went deeper than just facts. It was as if he knew the game better than anyone, as if he had walked in her shoes. Who are you? The words were out of her mouth before she could stop them, harsh and brittle in the otherwise quiet room. The man didn't flinch. His gaze locked onto hers, and for the briefest moment, the mask of indifference slipped. There was something in his eyes, something that flickered like a light caught in a dark corner, something vulnerable and uncertain. And yet the moment was gone before she could fully grasp it, replaced by the hard exterior he had shown her from the start. A mercenary, he said flatly, his gaze hardening once more. Just like you. The words hung in the air, but they didn't land where they were supposed to. She had never considered herself like them, the cold-hearted killers, the ones who lived off blood and contracts. But that was exactly what he was implying, wasn't it? I'm not like them, she said, her voice sharper than she intended, the edge of defensiveness cutting through the tension. I've never been. He raised an eyebrow, almost imperceptible. But the subtle challenge in his gaze made her question whether her words held any weight at all. Maybe she was fooling herself. Maybe she was no different from the mercenaries, running from one deal to the next, always fleeing, always hiding. And then, without warning, the atmosphere shifted. The oppressive silence in the room cracked open with the sharp ping of a small device nestled at the stranger's belt. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to send Tari's mind racing again. His fingers twitched, but his expression remained unreadable as he unclipped the device, bringing it up to his ear. Report, he said, the word almost a whisper, yet commanding. Tari's instincts flared, and she watched him closely, noting the change in his demeanor. A soft crackle followed, and then a voice, garbled but recognizable. The package has been secured, came the voice, distorted by static but unmistakably confident. We are en route. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Echelon is preparing for the extraction. Tari's blood ran cold. The words package and extraction hit her like a punch to the gut. She had known, of course. She had always known that she wasn't just being hunted for her life. She was being hunted for the knowledge buried deep within her. The secrets she carried were worth more than a fortune to Echelon Industries, worth more than her own life. The man turned off the device and slid it back into his belt. His expression was unreadable, his eyes dark as he looked at her. The silence stretched between them again, thicker than ever. Tari opened her mouth to speak, to demand answers, but she stopped herself. The words felt hollow now. What could she ask him that would make a difference? The truth was, she didn't know what he was after. And worse, she wasn't sure she could trust him to tell her. "Get ready," the man said suddenly, his voice a sharp contrast to the stillness that had enveloped them. "We're not safe here for long." Before she could protest or ask another question, he moved toward the door, slipping into the shadows with a fluidity that seemed unnatural. Tari hesitated for a heartbeat, her mind still swirling with the new revelations. But then, something in his tone, something in the urgency of his voice, made her follow. He had said the extraction was coming, and that could only mean one thing. They weren't just hunting her anymore. They were hunting him too. The weight of the truth settled over Tari like a shroud. The stakes had just changed. She wasn't just running from Echelon Industries anymore. She was running with them, the man who had saved her, and the man who might very well be just as dangerous as the mercenaries chasing them. They moved through the back corridors of the building, a labyrinth of narrow hallways and abandoned rooms. The stranger led the way with precision, his movements sure, his focus razor-sharp. Tari followed, her mind still racing with the implications of what had just transpired. And then, as they reached the end of a narrow corridor, the sound of approaching footsteps broke through the thick silence. They were closing in. The man paused, pressing a button on the wall beside him. A hidden door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a darkened stairwell leading down into the depths of the city. Without a word, he gestured for Tari to follow. She hesitated, her eyes scanning the stairwell. But there was no time for second thoughts. They were running out of time. Tari stepped into the darkness, and the door slammed shut behind them. In the silence that followed, the world outside felt miles away, but the truth was closer than ever. The stakes had risen, and there was no turning back now. Whatever was hidden beneath the surface of her past, whatever Echelon wanted to extract from her, was about to collide headfirst with a truth that none of them were prepared to face. And in the depths of the city, beneath the weight of secrets buried too long, the real game had begun. The descent into the underground corridors of the city was as disorienting as it was unsettling. The air grew colder, thicker, and the stale scent of old concrete mingled with the sharp tang of metal. Tari could feel the shift in the world above them, as though the very atmosphere was changing, drawing tighter around her with every step. The dim lights flickering overhead did little to pierce the darkness, and the echoes of their footsteps reverberated off the walls in a rhythmic pulse that matched the rapid beat of her heart. Her mind raced. The secrets, the unknowns, they gnawed at her from every corner. She had been running for years, always one step ahead of the mercenaries, always trying to outrun the memories that haunted her. But now, something had changed. The man who had saved her was no longer just an ally. He was a puzzle, a mystery wrapped in shadows, and the more she tried to peel back the layers, the more elusive he became. The truth was, she had no idea who he really was. His words, his actions, they were a carefully constructed mask, and she couldn't decide whether to trust the fragments she glimpsed or to bury the questions deep inside her, focusing only on survival. Behind her, she could hear the man's footsteps, each one deliberate and controlled. He was always close, never too far behind, but never close enough to make her feel entirely safe. His presence was both reassuring and unsettling. He was a mystery, and in the maze of this city, mysteries had a way of revealing their darkest sides. As they reached the end of the stairwell, the man paused, his hand going to a panel embedded in the wall. The faint hum of technology vibrated beneath her fingers as the hidden door slid open, revealing a narrow passageway that led deeper into the heart of the city. This was no ordinary place. She could feel it in the cold, metallic air. Tari swallowed hard. "Where are we going?" The man didn't answer immediately. His gaze lingered on her, that unsettling intensity radiating from him like an invisible force. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice low but steady. "Somewhere the corporation won't find us." It wasn't a lie, she knew that, but it was a half-truth. And in this world, half-truths were just as dangerous as lies. "Why did you save me?" she asked, her voice hoarse with the weight of her own questions. She had to know. It had been eating at her since the moment he'd appeared, like an enigma out of nowhere, defying all logic. Why had he put himself at risk for someone like her? The man's eyes softened for the briefest of moments, so brief she might have imagined it. Then he turned and continued walking, the soft click of his boots echoing through the narrow passage. Maybe I saw something in you. Something I've been running from for too long. Tari's brow furrowed, the meaning of his words just out of reach. Was that a confession? Or was it just another distraction, another carefully crafted line to keep her off balance? But before she could respond, the ground beneath their feet rumbled, a low, unsettling vibration that traveled through the metal beneath her boots. Tari's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes widened, instinct kicking in. They found us, she whispered, barely believing the words as they left her lips. The man froze, his expression shifting instantly from cold calculation to something sharper, familiar. In that moment, Tari saw something she hadn't seen before, a crack in the mask he wore, something raw and dangerous beneath the surface. He didn't have to say anything. The look in his eyes spoke volumes. "We need to move," he growled, his voice suddenly urgent. Without another word, he grabbed her wrist, pulling her forward into the winding passage. Tari didn't resist. She couldn't afford to. The sound of pursuit was already growing louder, distant but unmistakable. Echelon Industries was never far behind, never satisfied with anything less than their quarry. Tari's escape had been temporary, but now she could hear the unmistakable hum of their transport ships outside, their low engines vibrating the very walls. She had known this was coming, hadn't she? But even so, the reality of it still struck her like a physical blow. This wasn't just a matter of survival anymore. She wasn't just running from Echelon anymore. She was running from her own past, from whatever truth she had been too terrified to face. The man pulled her forward with one final surge of strength, and they burst into another narrow hall, this one darker and colder than the last. He didn't slow his pace, his footsteps steady and relentless as they turned a corner. Tari followed, her mind racing, her breath quickening. She could feel the tension in the air, the sense of something large and dangerous creeping ever closer. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice tinged with the fear she couldn't suppress. She wanted to believe she was stronger than this. She wanted to believe that fear had no hold over her anymore. But it did. It always did. The man didn't answer. Instead, he motioned for her to move faster, his hand now gripping her arm as he pushed her ahead of him. But Tari was done running. At least, she was done running from him. She turned, her pulse quickening as she faced him. "I need to know," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. "Why did you save me? You're not just some hired gun. There's something more. What is it?" His expression faltered for just a second, a flicker of something that might have been regret, before it was replaced by a harsh, unreadable mask once more. He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing, his lips pressing into a thin line. For a moment, Tari thought he might actually speak. But then, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed down the hall closer than before. A door loomed ahead. The man didn't hesitate. With one sharp movement, he pulled open the door, his body blocking her view as he ushered her inside. Inside, the room was dark, but the faint blue glow of holographic maps flickered in the corner, casting long, spindly shadows on the walls. It looked like some kind of operations room, though it was hardly any more secure than the tunnels they'd been running through. She looked at him again, her words coming in a low hiss. "Who are you?" For a long time, he didn't answer. His face was unreadable, his jaw clenched tightly. Then, at last, the words came, spoken in a tone far more resigned than she expected. "Someone who's been running for far too long," he muttered. "Someone who doesn't know if there's any place left to hide anymore." Tari felt the weight of his words settle around her. She didn't know what it meant. She didn't know what he was running from. But she knew one thing. The answers were somewhere ahead. And they would change everything. The city was a mausoleum of light and shadow. Above them, The stars blinked like distant memories, cold and indifferent to the chaos below. Tari stood on the precipice, gazing out at the skyline, a jagged silhouette of steel and glass, veins of light cutting through the night. But it was no longer the city that held her gaze. It was the truth, the weight of it pressing down on her chest like 1,000 suns. The past had a way of catching up, of winding its way into the present with the inevitability of a storm. And now, after everything, the chases, the lies, the alliances formed in the heat of desperation, she was standing at the crossroads of her own destiny. She could feel Leo's presence behind her, like a constant, a tether she had never wanted, but now couldn't imagine escaping. He had been the one constant through it all, the one thing that had changed the course of everything she thought she knew about herself. He had opened doors in her mind she hadn't known existed, and in return, she had unwittingly opened him to the raw edges of his own soul, making him confront the fractured man he had buried deep beneath his mercenary persona. But now, as the final chapter of their desperate journey unfolded, the price of everything they'd fought for, the secrets, the survival, had become starkly clear. "Are you ready?" Leo's voice broke the silence, low and urgent. Tari didn't answer immediately. She could hear it in his voice, the tremor of doubt that lingered even now, after everything they had been through together. He had always been the one to act first, to move without hesitation. But this time she knew it was different. They were standing on the edge of a precipice, the kind from which there was no return. "I don't know if there is such a thing as ready anymore," she replied, her voice distant, as though the words came from somewhere far deeper than her chest. "But this is it, isn't it? This is the end." Leo didn't answer right away. His silhouette was a blur at the corner of her vision, the tension between them palpable. Tari could feel him fighting it, fighting the pull of what had always been his instinct, to escape, to survive, to remain untouched by whatever darkness the universe had laid out for him. But they had come too far. The walls were closing in. Echelon Industries was no longer just a corporate entity. It was a scourge, a parasite that fed on the blood of those like her, those who held the key to power beyond the comprehension of men. The corporation had known this for years, had sought her species out for centuries, but only now did they realize the true extent of what they could do with her. Her people were not just skilled, they were the key. To what? That, she still wasn't sure, but she knew one thing. If they didn't stop them now, Echelon would unlock a power that would ravage entire galaxies, and it would all be because of her. She turned to face Leo, her eyes narrowing as she took in the resolve on his face. He had come far since they'd first met, a broken soldier, haunted by his past. He had made sacrifices he had not been ready to make, and now he was standing beside her not because of duty, but because of something deeper, something she couldn't quite place. "What's our next move?" he asked, his gaze never leaving hers. The silence between them grew heavy, filled with the weight of unspoken words, the knowledge of what was at stake. Tari opened her mouth to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. What could she say? There were no easy answers, no clean solutions. All she had was the truth. They had to end it now. And in the midst of it, they both knew what that would cost. Tari's fingers brushed against the small device hidden beneath her jacket, the key to unraveling the corporation's stranglehold on the galaxy. The data was stored there, encrypted beyond belief, but she had seen enough to know what it contained. The truth. The terrible, destructive truth that would be unleashed if Echelon Industries got their hands on it. The streets below them were alive with movement. Shadows flickered between the high rises, their presence barely more than whispers in the dark. She knew what was coming, knew it with every fiber of her being. The final confrontation, the battle she had been running from, was no longer something she could avoid. As the hum of the air cars grew louder, the first of the mercenary forces appeared from the horizon, their silhouettes slicing through the fog. They were here. "Ready or not," Leo murmured, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. "Let's finish this." Tari replied, her voice steady, her resolve hardening. They didn't have much time. The plan was simple, but the execution would require everything they had. They would infiltrate the Echelon compound, disable the servers housing the corporation's secrets, and burn the entire operation to the ground. It was a gamble, one that could destroy both of them in an instant, but it was the only option they had left. The air around them seemed to pulse with a low, almost imperceptible vibration, the hum of technology drawing closer. Tari looked at Leo one last time, the weight of her decision settling like a stone in her stomach. "I'm sorry," she whispered, more to herself than to him. He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "For what?" "For not knowing if we can make it out of this. For dragging you into this mess." Leo's lips twitched, just a flicker of a smile. "We're already in it, Tari. The only way out is through." Without another word, they moved, side by side, their steps synchronizing as they entered the heart of the storm. The walls trembled beneath the impact of the mercenaries' approach, the city above them oblivious to the battle that was about to unfold. Tari's mind raced, calculating every possible outcome, every decision that could mean life or death, but in that moment, she knew that there were no guarantees. They were beyond the point of no return. The final moments were a blur of gunfire, explosions, and the unrelenting pursuit of Echelon's forces. Tari fought with the precision of a woman who had spent her entire life running, her every move calculated, deliberate. Leo moved beside her, a shadow in the chaos, a silent force that cleared the path with lethal precision. Together, they were unstoppable. But even in the chaos, they knew this would be the last stand. As the compound's doors exploded open, a blinding light surged from within. Tari felt the rush of heat against her skin, the last vestiges of the past falling away in the firestorm. She could hear Leo shouting, urging her to move faster, to keep going, but her gaze was fixed on the device clutched tightly in her hand. This was the moment. She could destroy it, erase the secrets, sever the ties that had bound her people to Echelon. But there was a cost. There always was. With one final, resolute motion, Tari slammed the device into the ground, activating the self-destruct sequence. The data was gone, and with it, the last chance Echelon had to control the galaxy. Tari stood still for a moment, feeling the pulse of destruction radiating through the ground beneath her feet. Leo's hand gripped her shoulder, steady, supportive. "You did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. She nodded, unable to speak, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She had won. But in doing so, she had lost something else. Her past, her future. They were now shadows, things that no longer mattered. The explosion echoed in the distance, and the world seemed to fall silent. For the first time in years, Tari felt free. And as she looked at Leo, she knew that they had both made their choices. Whatever came next, they would face it together.